So now we're moving on to a question that we've been working on at City to See for several years. How can we make food to go good to go? Waste from the on-the-go sector, so that's things like takeaway coffee cups and takeaway lunch waste, appears consistently in the top 3 items littering our beaches. And if you've ever walked around any city, especially London, on a lunch break, you'll see those bins overflowing with waste from people having their lunch on the go. So our advocacy work at City to See, alongside other dedicated NGOs in the sector, applying pressure to policymakers, does appear to be working, with things like deposit return schemes being discussed, extended producer responsibility, I've said that enough times today, coming in, and selected single-use plastic items finally being banned, so things like cutlery and polystyrene cups. So it does feel like the sun is starting to peep over the horizon, but just very slowly. With me today to discuss the challenges and opportunities on the food-to-go sector are Matt Kennedy, founder and CEO of Again, Jim Pizer, founder of Tali Cafes and consultant on City to See's Refill Return Cup. And hopefully, within the next few minutes, we will have Safia Qureshi on the sofa as well. She's been held up. So hoping that she can join us. So if we have a guest just come in at the last minute, that's why. So we'll start with you two. Fantastic that you're here. Welcome.
Great to be here.
Thank you. So you're all working in the on-the-go sector. So let's start by you telling me a little bit about your work in the sector and how you're addressing the vast amount of waste that's being created in the takeaway food and drink sector. Let's start with you, Matt.
Yeah, amazing. So Again is a London-based technology startup that is really focused on reducing the cost and increasing the scalability of reusable packaging. The way that we do that is that we build and run all of the back-end infrastructure, the supply chain infrastructure, so things like sourcing facilities, washing facilities that are fundamental to scaling up the reusable packaging movement. So we actually work in a number of different industries and sectors. We work with retailers, waste management companies, logistics companies, all to collect reusable packaging. And then we work in the beverage and on takeaway on the go to enable that packaging to be reused through the clean cell. We're actually announcing on the retail side our expansion with Milk and More today. So we're powering the reuse of about 2.4 million bottles every year through one of our clean cells.
That's very cool.
Big movement there on the retail side.
I heard earlier that we need to move towards 360 million a year of things being washed and returned.
Great, yeah, bring them on.
That's a good
yeah, exactly. And earlier this year, we were working with Uber Eats as well on the takeaway side. So really testing and learning in different spaces to figure out where is the space that's best suited for scale within reuse.
So it's definitely more than a giant dishwasher, isn't it?
Definitely more than a giant dishwasher. Yeah, the reason that we focused on the giant dishwasher is because we think it's the nexus within the supply chain. So it means that on one side, we can power people to collect packaging really effectively. Then on the other side, we can get it back to people that want to refill it.
Yeah.
So we think it's a really central position to connect the supply chain.
Yeah, it's exciting. I mean, I have actually been in said giant dishwasher, but good to hear about all the other stuff that goes around that. Jim, tell us about your work.
So I've been working with the amazing team at City to See, as you know, on Bristol's Refill Return Cup scheme. So the Refill Return scheme is basically a digital borrow return platform that facilitates reuse. And because it's a digital solution, we can track the cups around the system and ensure we collect the impact data to prove that it has an environmental positive impact. I think from Refill Return's point of view, we're very much focused on the consumer, the end user, and building a movement within Bristol to prove that a citywide solution is feasible.
Yeah, that's actually launching today, isn't it, Dan?
And it's launching today, which a few hours ago. I know.
So you've come up from Bristol.
I know. It's been a real rushed morning, but it went really well. Great feedback. Yeah.
Great. And it's very much been about, I mean, I've haven't been directly involved in the project, but have seen it all evolving, and very much involved in looking at the behaviour change and the messaging around what's going to shift the habits, but and what's going to make someone look at that cup and really understand that that's to be reused.
Yeah, and we've got to start by proving consumer demand, because if the demand isn't there, trade is not going to adopt these schemes.
Yeah. Brill. So, Matt, back to you. You've done a lot of work around the cost of single-use
Yeah.
packaging. So how do the reuse systems compare with single-use when it comes to price?
Yeah, so typically not well. So when you look at the cost of single-use packaging over time, it's actually really interesting. You go back 50 years, single-use packaging was actually a lot more expensive than it has become over the last, certainly like 5 years ago. And just as more and more scale has got into single-use packaging, it's become almost impossibly cheap, right, to just manufacture more and more packaging. But what we're starting to see, certainly over the last 12 to 24 months, is an increasing of taxation on the producers, but also the rising cost of commodities. So things like plastics, glass, are just becoming more and more expensive. So glass was going up 26% year on year and has done for the last 10 years, right?
That's quite steep.
Yeah, it's quite steep. And so the things that were once cheap are no longer so cheap. But when we look at the reusable packaging market, it's typically even more expensive to reuse an item of packaging than it is for single use. What I want to say is that it is possible for reuse to actually undercut the single-use packaging price. So for instance, with our Milk and More integration, where we're using all of their existing delivery fleet, we're actually price parity with the single-use alternative for all of their brands.
Wow.
And that for us is really the critical thing, is like, if you add more vehicles on the road, we will not be able to hit our emissions goals, but also our economic goals of competing with the single-use status quo. So we're always looking for opportunities to utilize like existing fleets, whether it's like delivery vehicles or waste management companies or like Amazon delivery drivers.
Yeah.
But like people that are there anyway have to be the people to pick it up.
And that's very much been a theme that's emerging throughout the day, is that need for collaboration across sector.
Yeah.
And that's such a perfect example of how, we're going to be able to mobilize this. And I especially love that refill from home thing of it making it even more convenient to put your reusables. I'd like us to be able to put your reusable coffee cup as well that you might have taken home or had with you, and put that in your home collection, for example. Great. And that's a real achievement to get something on a par with single-use packaging.
Yeah, the single-use industry has had quite a long time to become very good and efficient and optimized. And I think what we're starting to see now is just a bit of a change in the tide.
Well, the fossil fuel industry has as well. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So Jim, you've been working on returnable cup schemes for quite a few years now. How have things changed since you started out on this journey?
I mean, going back 5+ years, there just wasn't the product to start with available that was commercially viable. They were unaffordable, they were not durable, and it was really hard to attach a unique ID to these products. So there's been huge advancements there. And the business models have changed completely. I mean, going back several years, it was all about branded products, and a lot of the businesses were dependent on items being lost from the system, whereas now we're seeing pooled universal stock, and the model switched to more of a pay-per-use or subscription type model.
And we're using Circular & Co for the...
We've collaborated with Circular & Co, which is a great example of not trying to do everything. I think you've got to know your strengths and partner with people that can provide the other elements to the scheme.
Yeah, and we certainly, when we started City to Sea and the refill campaign, people were like, well, you need a bottle. It's like, well, I don't think we want to be a bottle company, but, and then partnering with Chili's, that's that sort of thing of, letting people play to their strengths.
Yeah.
And I think, we've been very good at rabble rousing and getting people engaged and using these systems.
Yeah, raising awareness,
Yeah.
and just being that public face for the sector.
Yeah.
Do you think there has been a difference in consumer awareness?
Definitely. I mean, consumers are well educated on the whole. They understand the issue, and they want to buy into these systems, but the convenience just isn't there at the moment. So with the best will in the world, it's really hard to create habitual change.
Yeah, and that's the thing of if you currently want to live a reusable, refillable life, you need a big backpack.
Yeah.
Because you're taking your bottle with you, you're taking your coffee cup, your reusable lunchbox, your cutlery. And I think there's very much a place for that. And people love using their own products. And but I think there's also, we're going to see, like with the borrow return coffee cup, where if you've forgotten your reusable, there is an option and you don't have to go to single-use packaging. So what do you think the hold-up is then in terms of mass adoption of these systems? I'll ask that to both of you. Go on, Jim, start with you.
I think all elements need to be proven. There needs to be a track record. And at the moment, you know, we need to test business models, services, products, demand in the different sectors. Yeah, so that's one of the reasons things aren't, you can't scale something until you've got a proven blueprint.
I think for me, so as a company, we're almost, well, we are obsessed by economics. So we're obsessed about the cost of reuse versus the single-use alternative. And one thing that we're seeing is that it is still true today that waste management companies will earn more money from collecting recyclables that can be crushed on the curbside than they can from collecting reusables. And whilst that is true, there will always be this like fundamental inconvenience around reuse because it will be a separate stream that's a niche stream.
Yeah.
So I think for me, the biggest thing is that the economics have to change, particularly in the waste management industry, to enable this to work for a full system.
I think that's really, I'm glad that you're focusing on that, because I think certainly not within the refill return cup space necessarily, but for generally environmentalists, they're like, change, we've got to make that change happen now. But you know, you have to have the solid business case as well for businesses to be able to plan and adopt it.
Yeah.
I think our third guest has arrived. I hope she can maybe come and take a breath. Safia, come and join us on the sofa. Hey. Well done for making it. Safia Qureshi, co-founder of Club Zero. Founder and CEO of Club Zero. No co's about it.
Got a founding team, not co's.
Exactly. Thank you for joining us. If you're ready, it would be lovely to hear a little bit about you and the part that Club Zero play in helping us transition to a refillable world.
Absolutely, my pleasure. First of all, thank you everybody for your patience. So Club Zero was started back in 2018, and we knew that there needed to be a design approach that was thinking about it from a holistic perspective. So we are not just supplying packaging or doing one or the other element, we're a whole returnable packaging system. So I think generally, the transformation since 2018 to now has been brilliant. We've seen so much evolve across reuse and return systems, and we still have a long way to go. So I would say we have another 5 years till we get to peak consumer consciousness about returnables and about reuse. Just to put a time in everyone's calendar, 2028. So 5 years, I think, is when we're going to get to that point. And the best thing that we can do to get to that point fast and effectively and in a way where it's genuinely sustainable is collaboration. So everybody making all the noise together in that space as much as possible, because we all are generally spending our day-to-day with the same mission. So fundamentally, how do we get that faster? How do we get there faster? How do we do it together?
Yeah, brilliant.
Good to see you, Jim. And Matt.
So I might overly focus on Safia for a little while, but I think the next question that we were going to come to was really to talk about the EU's packaging and packaging waste law is proposing a ban on single-use packaging in restaurants and cafes by 2030, which is exciting if that happens. No doubt others in the industry will be trying to delay and derail that, but we'll be pushing for it. And an increase in reusables for takeaway food to 10% by 2030. So it sounds like progress, but maybe each of you could talk to us a bit about what that could mean in the UK and whether we're going to get pushback from the big brands. And Safia, I'll come back to you.
Yeah, I think we work with some really big brands ourselves, and I think there's definitely excitement, there's definite appetite. It's very hard for the big brands to do it all themselves, and that's the big learning for us. Initially, when we started off our journey, we'd have everyone from investors to other clients saying, but aren't big brands just going to do this all themselves? They can't do all of it themselves, they'll do a part of it themselves, but they do definitely rely on other businesses sort of transforming and supporting, getting them to that transition. So there will be a lot of pushback where commercials just don't add up for a lot of these big brands currently, and we've seen that as well. We've seen the lobbying that's happening. McDonald's is definitely leading that charge. We've heard about it. We've seen all the press releases on Packaging Europe. It's no secret. I think there's a lot of disappointment because a lot of the interactions we've had with some of those large brands have always been about pilots. In fact, one of the big conversations I was having on my way here is, they're always looking to trial and test and do pilots, but when you start to talk about scale, everything goes very quiet. And I think the main reason for that is they're just either not ready, they haven't really materially thought about the full context of what they need to do to get there. And what happens is with small businesses, trialing and piloting is a massive, massive cost for us, actually. It makes absolutely no sense for us to continue doing them. And we've done lots of pilots. We've actually done pilots for McDonald's and Starbucks, West Coast, retail. We've produced reports. We've collaborated with the likes of closed loop partners. We've done tons of pilots. So now when anyone comes over and says, hey, I'd love to do a pilot, I basically price the hell out of it because I know I'm not going to make a return. I know it's not going to go anywhere further, and it's not a good use of our time to do a pilot that's not going to go anywhere. So our focus has been a lot about focusing on the brands that genuinely want to see that transformation, that can prove that they have the capability. And that is actually first starts with internal capability. Do they have the manpower? Do they actually have somebody to drive that ship? I'm not talking about individual sort of, people on the ship who might have small components of it, but do they actually have internal force that you can work with to transform that?
Hugely important, because if you don't have that buy-in from the company,
where is it going to go? Yeah, it's not going to go very far. And it can become very frustrating for very senior leadership as well. So I can empathize on many grounds because they're speaking at, the likes of, Economic Forum events, and they're making these massive pledges and they want to see transformation to some degree. But then there's them at the top, then there's a huge gap in the middle of, who's going to own it? How is it going to all happen? Who's going to put it together? And they just don't have the capacity to manage that alongside everything else. So quite often we've, started off with guns blazing, it's going to be amazing. And then you realize, gosh, it's going to take a lot longer and cost us a lot more than what we had envisaged.
Yeah, thank you.
What do you think the reason is for that gap between the pilot and the scale?
Matt's definitely seen this. All this
Sure.
What's the reason? Well, it's easy to say I'll pilot something, I'll test something from a PR perspective, because it sounds like I just want to get my feet in the water and I'll make a decision off the back of that. And it doesn't scare shareholders. It doesn't scare anyone in the organization when you call it a pilot or a trial. Whereas if you genuinely say, this is what I'm going to do, and these are the dates, and these are not pledges, like if someone was to actually hold them to account and say, okay, well, you said you would do this by then, then it becomes very serious. And then you have to get official approval, you have to get board approval, you have shareholder approval, and that whole thing has to then be genuinely evaluated from a cost perspective. And the only real time they'll do that is when regulation makes it happen.
Yeah. Or commercial.
Or something, yes, but we know that moving from single use to reuse requires an awful lot of capex investment or new development, new investment into it. So,
Jim, what were you going to add then?
I was going to say, I think big business, they're reluctant to be the first to try to scale these solutions. So they're just risk averse, and I think that's one of the main issues.
Yeah, almost waiting to see who goes
first.
It's money from it.
Yeah.
Generally.
Yeah.
Matt, did you have any thoughts?
Yeah,
on...
I think for me, we've definitely seen the same kind of leap, the chasm between the pilot and the scale for sure. But I think for me, you almost see it in the teams that you're talking to, this change in the return on investment of the engagement. So it turns from a publicity or a PR or a marketing return on investment. And then suddenly the narrative and the language that is being used in the meetings starts becoming about cost of goods, or it starts becoming about commercial return on investment, capital payback, and all of that sort of stuff. And I think that's often where stuff can fall between the cracks if that hasn't been the goal from the get-go.
Yeah. It's also supply chain. So supply chain is a very slow moving creature. It isn't just tech. I mean, we're a tech company, but we're a tech company working in supply chain essentially, which is like vastly or ghastly uninvestable for a lot of investors. Because they will understand that this has a very long horizon. This isn't something that's going to come back to them anytime soon. So, and I mean, I remember personally when in the 90s at some point, there was that switch between getting milk bottles outdoors, like outside your house, and then putting them back, to the sort of formed plastic milk jugs that you get now from the supermarket. I personally remember that. I'm a millennial, by the way, if anyone's worrying at this point. So that is the level of supply chain interaction that's happened to make that change would have started 20 years before that. Like, I mean, I imagine this isn't something that just suddenly happened overnight. And that was a big transformation. We all then thought, we have to get our milk from the supermarket. Yeah, it's not going to come to our door. Oh, and it's in this massive plastic thing which we'd never bought milk in.
Which, I mean, we've been seeing a little bit of a movement back towards home deliveries and home refills, which I think is great. But as you're saying, it could take another decade until the infrastructure's there for that to become more affordable and for all. So I'm just going to throw a bit of a curveball question at you all, because this is the first session where we've had maybe more sort of startups involved, and one of the themes that's been coming through today is like investment. So where have you, like, how have you managed to source investment? Where do you need it else for it to come from? Would it need to come from government too? Matt?
Yeah, I think so. We are a venture capital backed, primarily a technology and logistics startup. So we have some fantastic investors within the venture capital community, but also within the corporate venture capital. So some of the world's biggest logistics companies are investors within ours.
Because they see that they will probably be using your services in the future, therefore.
Yeah, exactly. So as an example, Maersk, the world's biggest shipping company, is an investor in the business. And I think when you make your money in global trade, which is typically east to west, there is a big potential disruption within local circularity, right? So companies like that are investing, and we're starting to see more engagement from the waste management community in investing in solutions.
Helpful. So I'm just going to keep it fairly short so we can fit in some more questions about the future. But what about like subsidies and government investment?
Great. I mean, the UK government is very much behind reductions in single-use plastics. So that's not an unknown fact. They've put an awful lot of funding into lots of businesses, including us, to support the transition to returnable and reuse. Which is what's needed, and they've got policy coming out, bans coming out this year. So they'll officially ban polystyrene in October, which is brilliant, which impacts all of the sort of expanded foam chip clamshells that you've seen. Those will disappear overnight. It also includes all those horrible sushi black boxes that you've seen. That's actually PS, and a bunch of other product lines will disappear. Now, that has other unintended consequences, which are positive. So by removing those from the market, it will reduce the sales of that product across the market, which means something needs to take its place. Well, reuse and returnable should be taking its place.
Exactly.
And so that's where we come in, where, okay, so you've got ban legislation happening, then the market is going to say, okay, well, certain packaging suppliers are going to think, well, we can't sell that. Or distributors are going to say, we can't sell that. Well, then what could we sell?
Yeah. So that kind of opens up the space for more refill and reuse. So legislation works.
Legislation is the only way that this is going to change. I've lost complete hope that anyone's going to do it off the back of just sustainability, or I simply go by that. I've seen firsthand the difference.
Right.
And I think we've seen it with EVs. We've seen it with most of these other sort of renewables. It's just the way that it's going to go.
And certainly what we focus on City to See as well with our Cut the Cutlery campaign, which I think we played its part with. We got 50,000 people, 120,000 signed the petition, and we got 50,000 people to fill out the DEFRA consultation to get them bring about
Well
that
done.
ban. So yeah, that was well done everybody that got involved in that. So looking to the future, this is a bit more of a quick fire round. We're all about like reimagining the future here. So Jim, let's start with you. Your vision for the future of on the go packaging.
I mean, for this to really take off, the return infrastructure needs to be integrated within cities. It can't be left to the people who are providing the service because it's just not affordable. So, yes, I mean, I think we need to raise awareness, then we need to be really conscious of our actions, and we need to build communities that are around sort of engaged reusers rather than sort of passive consumers. There needs to be a cultural change.
Yeah.
Nice. And Matt?
Yeah, I think we were talking before, but the embedding collection of reusables within everyday waste management at a residential level is just like fundamental to scale, in my view. So that would be the biggest thing.
So in a way, like you do your recycling, it's going to be like you do your reusables.
Exactly.
Yeah, nice. Thank you.
Yeah,
That's
return and repair. I mean, definitely, I agree with Matt on that stream, and we're supporting that as well. That there is definitely something that needs to happen in the consumer consciousness, and that has to start on multiple levels. So one is in the home, and that will be immediately when you get, let's say, a yellow return point, which is something that you use to return your reusable packaging, anything that requires repair or mending, etc. Like that is the zero waste stream.
That's nice. That's the first time anyone's brought in repair into the Global Reuse
Well, I just
Summit.
wanted to put it
love
all
that you
together
brought that
because I think this will become. I mean, you need to think like I said, supply chains are so long. You've really got to think about 30 years because that's how local governments will procure things anyway. It's like 30, 50 years from now. And so you want to pack in all the things that you know are going to be required, even if it is a bit further down the line.
Yeah.
So yes, so that is an additional piece that will come into the consumer consciousness because it's in their home. And then the second is, of course, which is already evolving with supermarkets, trying to do refills and returns, albeit it's glacial and albeit it's very small volumes comparatively across the board. But again, that's part that fits the consumer consciousness. And then at some point, there should be a tipping point that will support the pickup experience when you're doing that.
All right, so in 10 seconds each, or thereabouts, the one thing, if you could choose one thing that would really help you scale your business's scale for Again or the Refill Return Cup or for Club Zero, the one thing you really need to do to scale in your work.
Waste management companies get on board.
Okay, you heard it here.
I think legislation, so the cost parity is the same between single use and reuse.
Amazing.
Businesses ask for zero waste packaging. That's where the consumers are in hordes, and I think that's where we start.
That's absolutely fantastic. I've just been shown that we've got an extra minute. So is there anything that we haven't covered or anything else that you feel like we need to...
Well, let's flip it the other way. What would you like to see from reuse companies?
That's a great question. I think I'm going to be direct and say
Go for it.
investment in the things that we're doing, like at World Refill Day, because we're a non-profit organisation and we're kind of tilling the soil and getting the audience ready for all of the businesses in the refill and reuse space. So yeah, the one thing I would like is investment and
Money.
money. And you can donate on the City to See website here today. Thank you so much.
Thank
This has been a
you.
really great panel, and I'm really thrilled. I love all of your businesses and initiatives, and your passion as well driving it, because I know it's not easy, and I know there's a lot of sleepless nights involved. And so well done. And your oceans. If I may thank you on behalf of the oceans, then I do.